The African Union has pledged to assist Kenya in battling the drought that's ravaging parts of the country. Last week, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta declared the drought a national disaster and called on the international community's assistance. The outgoing AU Commissioner for Rural Economy and Agriculture says the organization is conducting a technical analysis to determine what kind of support to offer.
I believe Kenya is going to apply for assistance because some countries have really got access to this money, like Niger. We gave money to Niger through Africa Risk Capacity. It's like an insurance. It has an insurance arm. We are discussing to see if we can mobilize resources internally to see how we can support Kenya, because Kenya is a strong member state of African Union. They contribute resources, and also they have contributed actually also to Africa Risk Capacity, as I told you. So African Union is already now carrying out an assessment. I have already directed my team. They are working with the political affairs to look at what we can do for countries like Kenya.
Well, my colleague Clementine Logan spent some time in Kenya's Marsabit County recently. It is one of the regions worst affected by the drought. She joins me now in studio to tell us more. Clement, certainly it seemed from your stories that it was a bleak environment there in Marsabit. Just tell us more about how badly communities in the area are affected.
Well, Lindy, it's certainly dire. As you said, we were in Marsabit, which is in northern Kenya, and it's currently one of 13 counties that are in the alarm stage of drought classification. And the reason that the situation is so serious there is because so many people depend on livestock rearing and breeding for their income or sometimes their entire means of survival. It's a deeply entrenched way of life, particularly the nomadic pastoralism, which are communities that move around to graze their animals. But the frequency and severity of drought at the moment is making that way of life so much harder for so many people. And in some cases, herders are now having to walk for days at a time without much food or water to find any pasture at all for their animals. So it's certainly a very bleak situation. And we met one herder who told us that him and a couple of his friends had lost 550 of their animals in just 3 days. He took us to a spot where the ground was just covered with dead animals. It's a really bleak scene, and many people are now entirely dependent on handouts.
And indeed, it's that dependency on the land that's really led to a lot of suffering. What has been done so far to alleviate some of that suffering in the region?
Well, while we were there in Marsabit, we certainly saw distribution of food and water by the county and national governments, and we saw, witness firsthand how crucial that is, particularly for these nomadic communities who really don't know where to turn to next. They don't know where to go that's going to offer them a better way of life. So they are, some of these communities are entirely dependent on that. There's also the Kenya Red Cross, which has recently extended its cash transfer program to Marsabit County. That allows people who are in need to access basic goods in order to survive. But beyond that, people are now starting to think about longer-term preventative measures to avoid getting to such a serious and extreme situation where people are faced with losing their entire means of survival. And that's where the index-based livestock insurance program comes in. It's a scheme developed by a Kenyan economist who we met with. And essentially, it offers some of these nomadic pastoralists and those who depend on livestock an economic lifeline where otherwise there wouldn't be one. It allows them to insure their assets, so their animals, in particularly drought-prone areas, and this is our report from Marsabit.
For months, nomadic communities in northern Kenya have been waiting for the rains to come. Traditionally, the number of livestock a person has indicates their wealth. Many are desperate to cling on to them in large numbers, but the drought has already claimed thousands. Jaldesa Denge used to lose almost all his cattle to drought. But this year, he's purchased livestock insurance at around $10 for each of his cows.
Many people get a lot of a loss. I think somebody who have 100 or 70 cattle remain with 3 or 2. I think it's a better life today now. We even got the compensation from the insurance. So people are now seeing it is better now to have some compensation.
The index-based livestock insurance is the brainchild of award-winning Kenyan economist Andrew Mude.
Trying to manage the risk related to the loss of a key asset we felt was an important problem that we needed to solve, and that's why we turned to this index-based livestock insurance program. These are populations that over time are regularly ravaged by drought, And you always hear, of the government having to respond, donors having to respond with, food aid or cash aid more recently. And usually these responses take time. And in such situations where people's livelihoods and lives are at threat, you really need to have an intervention that occurs, a bit more objectively and a bit more rapidly. And that's what the promise of insurance holds.
The insurance protects against prolonged forage scarcity. Satellite imagery reveals how much foliage has been lost to calculate the projected impact on herds. It then triggers a payment to pastoralists to help maintain their livestock. Kenya's Ministry of Agriculture, with donors, is helping poor households insure at least 5 livestock units for free. 1 unit represents 1 cow, 10 goats, 10 sheep or 0.7 camels. The payout per unit is set at $140. The amount is based on how much it would cost to keep the animals alive rather than replace them. The payouts can range from 5 to 100% of the total insured value. And herders are paid whether they lose animals or not, giving them an incentive to manage their livestock well. Findings by the International Livestock Research Institute show that during periods of drought, insured households are less likely to sell off their livestock or reduce food intake for children.
I'm able to even assist my families. They're getting milk. At this time now, the 2 animals I have, they're getting water, buying food when I got that insurance coverage.
The remaining work has to do largely with what is the right way to organize policy so that any public support is effective and actually catalyzes private engagement. We believe that there will be a payout that's commensurate to the type of drought. And so this could be a real milestone for the program, a real demonstration of value so that others who are not familiar with the product or who are still skeptical could begin to understand that, well, the product does pay out and this is a real risk management benefit that they could have access to.
Over 11,500 households in Marsabit County have bought the insurance, and ILRI is working with the government to roll out livestock insurance to all 14 arid and semi-arid counties across Kenya. Clementine Logan, CGTN, Marsabit in northern Kenya.
Well, in the coming days, we are expecting an announcement by the Kenyan government of a very significant payout to people who have purchased this livestock insurance. And those that are behind the scheme really hope that this is going to encourage more people in a similar situation and who are particularly vulnerable to protect their assets in this way. And they really hope that it's going to actually change lives.
Indeed, it's a very commendable initiative and, of course, bringing some sorely needed relief to these communities. Thanks very much, Clementine Logan, joining me here in studio.